like any documentary, use TV clips and news anchors and whatnot to sort of narrate the events. But what I did is I started off by making a 24-hour timeline and with like 20 video layers and just kind of laid all the raw footage in time on different layers so I could see, like when I had the helicopter footage, you could see exactly at this point the Bronco was getting off at the 405 and the Knicks were at this point in the third quarter, so I could kind of see all the different confluence of events. The hardest part was actually whittling it down and then realizing that at a certain point it couldn't just be telling the story chronologically, because then it's just like you're just watching television.
Juxtaposition of the NBA finals of the finest basketball players we have to offer and the pursuit of one of the finest football players we ever own. It's eerie.
Yeah, I haven't watched it for a while, so anyway.
I just watched it last night, and I was so blown away by it. And that reminds me just how emotional the film is. It's all this archival footage, but the emotion, there's this heightened emotional state through the whole thing, and it's almost like one of OJ's like runs.
Yeah, I mean, people are so crazy about sports fans, but then in this film, it's like it transcends to this new strange level where it's like actual human tragedy, like life and death, and the end of a career, the end of someone's life. Perhaps he's about to commit suicide. What's really cool in the movie later on, it's like everyone knows the outcome, but I think we were able to actually build it to a point where when he's sitting in the driveway of his house, you actually think he might kill himself, even though everyone knows he's not. But it's like really.
How big a role did sound play in building that kind of? I mean, because it's like I got chills watching it, obviously, because it's really, really building to something and suspenseful and exciting. And how much of that did you do while you were editing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, most of the sound layering I did was with the news anchors and the voices and that sort of thing. Most of the big sound design happened at the very end, but the music I cut to like Philip Glass stuff but this was all this guy Jeff Dana did an awesome job. It's a really great score.
I find that you have to have temp music in your, in my very first assembly, I have a lot of music. You have to, or the film just drags and you have no sense of how it's going to work as a movie when there is score. You try not to fall in love with the temp score. You try to get the director not to fall in love with the temp score, particularly because, as editors, we go to things we know, we go to things that we can find easily. It's not necessarily, the perfect music for the film, but it's doing what it needs to do. It's either creating momentum, it's moving things along, creating mystery, creating drama, maybe just ambient, just creating a creepy mood in a lot of the stuff that I do. And it's important to realize that a composer is going to bring a whole fresh approach to the movie and not fall in love with it. Like on Mea Maxima Culpa, which I just finished, we started out thinking we were making a horror film. Alex felt he was making a horror film, so I pulled and we hired a guy who's creepy and does dark music. I mean, he's like the Prince of Darkness. And he had done Taxi to the Dark Side. And so and he had done some demos for us, and they were really creepy and dark. And I found, once I got past the first act of the movie, that no, it's not a horror film. It's a crime story. It's a crime whodunit, like mystery story. Who's responsible? It's absolutely, we need momentum. We need sort of like Hitchcock. I think it's just important not to fall in love with your temp score, because as you go on, you don't have time to find new music, but you realize that the film isn't what you thought it was in the beginning when you first pulled that music to be able to start cutting. And so you really have to keep an open mind and keep changing it up so that you don't get stuck in maybe something that's not helping your film.
This will be a clip from Taxi to the Dark Side that Sloan worked on with Alex Gibney. For those who haven't seen it, it examines the U.S. role, the U.S.'s policy on torture and interrogation techniques.
Basically, it was a reenactment of a particular interrogation at Guantanamo of a guy named Mohammed al-Qahtani. And the scene was really important to the film because it was for this one guy, this one interrogation, that Donald Rumsfeld had initially approved a whole menu. And literally, you'll see it in the film. It's a document that looks like a menu with stuff on two sides like a menu of enhanced interrogation techniques. That were kind of vague and were supposed to be used only on this one guy. But the minute they were sent to the soldiers at Guantanamo, they posted them on the military closed internet service. And immediately, guys in Afghanistan started using it. And then those guys in Afghanistan were sent to Abu Ghraib to set up the prison at Abu Ghraib. And it wasn't like a few bad apples and an anomaly. It was actually policy. And we needed to prove that. The military log of the entire 52-day interrogation was published in Time magazine in a redacted form. And I think they really redacted were the soldiers' names who participated. But it was pretty much all there for you to read, like the daily soldiers' logs of what they had done. And they had done some really bizarre things. I mean, it was super, super strange because they were free to interpret these techniques, these kind of vague techniques that were approved, any way they thought any way they saw fit. And so he had reenacted all the bits that seemed to him to be really strange. And it was shot in color on video, 6 years ago, before there were really great lenses and things could be sort of out of focus and impressionistic. And it looked like a Gap commercial for torture. I mean, and, I used in my first cut, it was like a music video. Like I used all the music that they played to keep him awake, and they used things like die motherfucker, die motherfucker. It was just obnoxious. And, I did what I was supposed to do, but people thought we were trying to be funny. People thought we were trying to make a joke about torture. And Alex didn't want to cut the scene because it was important to the story. And actually, we had a professor who's an expert on torture, who we had an interview with him where he broke down everything that happened in that interrogation and explained where those techniques came from, and they all came from the CIA torture experiments of the 60s. And then he compared the Muhammad al-Qahtani interrogation to the Abu Ghraib photos and said, see, this is what's happening in the Abu Ghraib photos. This is this technique. This is this approved technique. So we had to deal with it. And Alex was like, you got to find a way to make it work. I'm not giving up that scene. So what I did was, I did have two people talking about the interrogation. I had an interview with Muhammad al-Qahtani's lawyer, where she described the interrogation, and I had a C-SPAN Senate hearing with a general who had to do a report on the Muhammad al-Qahtani interrogation, this guy, General Schmidt. And so I had this very serious C-SPAN Senate hearing, and I had one interview. And I decided to just
Do you want to let it play now?
Oh, yeah, we should show it, and then I'll...
Okay.
So this is where it wound up.
He was only permitted to sleep 4 hours a day from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock in the morning, and that lasted for 50 days with one exception. He was held in severe isolation and sensory deprivation. There are a number of instances in the log where you'll see the phrase invasion of space by a female, and that was actually an interrogation tactic designed to break his faith.
Interrogator approached the detainee from behind, rubbed his back, whispered his ear, and ran fingers through his hair. That was authorized under the futility technique.
I thought it was important that you feel something for this man. You see him as a human being and you feel something, and that there be pathos in the sequence. And the problem was originally, by just, underscoring the absurdity of what the guards were doing and how they interpreted the techniques, it had no pathos. It seemed like we were trying to be funny, and it offended people. It was just totally wrong with the film. So I think a lot of why you have rough cut screenings and you bring your friends into the cutting room and people whose opinion you respect is to make sure that you're, tonally you're on the right track. There are certain films that just have no room for comedy, and this was one of them.